Welcome everybody. Super Mondays here in the Holy Land, the Holy Apple, the Holy Hilltop, Tal Binyamin. We are on the 23rd day of the month of Tevet, 5782. First, we take this opportunity, as always, to thank our one and only, the person that without him we wouldn't have a class here. Our cameraman comes out when we need to roll. He's always here, and without him we have no voice. Speaking of no voice, the reason why I'm using this loudspeaker is because last couple of days I have not been feeling 100%, and my voice is a little bit hoarse, so I'm going to use it. Hope it sounds okay out to you all. Okay, we're on part 4, the grand finale, Torah Anytime. Yes, that lovable Torah website, Torah Anytime. You've crossed over a red line. Part 4, grand finale, Torah Anytime. You've crossed over a red line. Highly advisable, go back to the first 3 parts, and at the same time, take a couple of minutes, 5 minutes, it won't take you more than that. Go to the Torah Anytime website and send an email to them. On the bottom right, there's a place to contact them, to write them a letter, an email, and complain. Ask at least the beginning of the class given by Rabbi Avichai Cohen. It's called 15 Keiravtuni. Be either removed or allow another voice to refute his extremely harsh and callous words against hundreds of thousands of Jewish boys, men, who day, night, summer, winter, fall, spring, do their best to protect the Jewish people. Okay, so let's go. Let's roll. Our last class, part 3, we were talking about, our last point was King David, and how King David had mercy on the king of Ammon, whose father saved King David's brother. But Hashem had already given the commandment that on the nation of Ammon, one should not have mercy on them. Lo tidrosh bishlomam. Okay, that's where we ended off. Today we're going to take it. The third, our third father figure who made a terrible mistake of having mercy on the enemies. Once again, King Saul was the first. Our second was King David. And third, new today, is the king of Israel, King Achav. This is taken out, you can check it out yourselves. It's taken out of the book of Kings, chapters 20 and 21. On one hand, the king of Israel, Achav, he had mercy on the king of Aram, Ben-Hadad. On the other hand, he was cruel to his own people, especially to a Jewish man named Navot HaYisrael. So let's summarize what happened with the king. Here comes the king. Ben-Hadad, the king of Aram, had surrounded the cities of the Shomron in Israel. Achav, the king, was prepared to surrender. However, Ben-Hadad, when he saw that the Jewish people were willing to surrender, raised the white flag. His demands escalated, And sometimes, baby, you bite off a little bit more than you can chew. So it backfired on him. Even though they were about to surrender, he escalated his demands, and therefore, with the instruction of the leaders of the Jewish people, the religious leaders of the Jewish people, King Achav refused to surrender. Twice, the king of Aram Ben-Hadad attacks the Jewish people. Twice, he loses. This forces Ben-Hadad to want to sign a peace treaty with the Jewish people, led by the king Achav. Achav agrees to such a treaty, even though the prophet had warned him not to sign a treaty with these people. The soldiers of Aram, who realized they were in hot water because they had been defeated twice and they were surrounded, they told the king that you should know that the leaders of the Jewish people are merciful. I'm sure they'll accept us. If we surrender, I'm sure they'll be kind to us, and if we surrender. So sometimes a name of merciful, many times that backfires in life, because many people, the only thing that they understand is force and strength, unfortunately. But that's what they decided to do. People of Israel, the leaders of Israel, are people of kindness. And Achav agrees to sign a treaty with the king of Aram, Ben-Hadad, and even Achav calls this leader of Aram, who has attacked the Jewish people and God wanted to be destroyed, he uses the terminology, my brother, which is amazing. In 1160 in France, one of the leading Jewish commentaries on the Torah and also on the prophets and the scriptures was a man named Rabbi David Kimchi, otherwise known as the Radak. So the Radak on Kings, the book of Kings, chapter 20, verse 35, he says the following. Achav did not want to destroy Ben-Hadad, thus transgressing the words of God. Achav should have understood that God wanted him to destroy all the soldiers and army of Aram. Mercy unto the wicked is cruelty, since eventually those enemies will wage war against the people of Israel. An amazing commentary, and I like to call it a commentary of common sense, that the Radak comes out. By the way, the Radak was not a lone wolf on this. If you look up the Abarvanel in Kings 1 and chapter 21, verse 1, he also says exactly the same message. Do not have mercy on those that are cruel, because eventually they will muster up enough military strength to attack. They might smile for some months, for some years, sometimes for decades, but they've never forgotten the defeat the Jewish people handed to them, and eventually, when they feel it's the right time and they have the power, they will attack the Jewish people. That's the message here by the Abarvanel and the Radak. Immediately after this story between the Jewish people and the nation of Aram, comes the story. The second story is King Achav, he's asking from this Jewish fellow, Nevot HaYisraeli, to sell him a vineyard. Nevot refuses to sell a family inheritance. He has respect for his family, and he's not about to sell it to anybody. Achav's wife, her name was Izebel, arranges to have Nevot killed, and thus not only killing him and murdering him, but also taking his field. So this is this is back-to-back Torah chapters. And we see very clearly that on one hand, the king of Israel had mercy on the nations of the world, Aram, and on the other hand, those that are merciful unto the cruel will eventually, with him it was pretty quick, will be cruel to the merciful. So the same Achav who was merciful to this Gentile king that God wanted him to destroy that army, he turns away from that and he's cruel to his own people. How many times in history, till this very day, do we see such things, such a phenomena? Next, moving right along, we have the difference between Joshua and Moses. Difference between Joshua and Moses. We know that Moses lived for 120 years and Joshua only lived for 110. Now, Joshua was the student, kind of like the son of Moses. So it would only seem that correct that they should live the same amount of time. In the times of the Torah, a person's age has a tremendous amount of importance, and if Moses is able to reach the pedestal, which is 120 years, which we bless people, you should live to the fullest is 120, what was missing from Joshua? And our sages tell us in Bamidbar Rabbah 22:5. It tells us exactly the difference between Moses and Joshua. Moses, when he was told to avenge against the people of Midian, who were the instigators of inciting the Jewish people to sin with the daughters of Moab. When Moses was told to arrange for a war against the Midianites, God told him that as soon as he finishes this mission, Moses will pass away. Now, if Moses wanted to, he could have schlepped it out for months and even years, because his life could have been extended. But that's not the way Moses worked. Immediately, the speed of lightning, Moses goes out there, he arranges the troops, and they go out to avenge against the people of Midian. On the other hand, Joshua, in a similar light, God tells Joshua that as soon as he finishes conquering the land of Israel and distributing it to the different tribes, the inheritance, he too will cease to live. Joshua said, why should I speed up the process of conquering the nations? I'm just going to take it slow. And he took it slow. It took him 7 years. 7 years to conquer and 7 years to give out inheritances to the 12 tribes. So therefore, God took away from Joshua 10 years of his life because he tried to prolong his life, but God wanted this mitzvah of conquering the land of Israel to be as fast as possible. We all know when a person observes a commandment, we're trying to do it as fast as possible. For example, when is the best time to pray? The best time to pray is during the sunrise, because that is the first moment that we could catch the commandment of praying. So a Jew tries to do all the commandments in a very speedily fashion. We like to accept Shabbat as early as possible. The earlier, the better. There's a limit to that, of course. You can only accept it approximately an hour and 15 minutes before sunset, but that an hour and 15 minutes, as fast as you could accept Shabbat, the better it is. Okay, but this is an amazing take. The Sfat Emet in the year 1875, so it's 150 years ago, approximately. It tells us an amazing thing, folks. I mean, I still can't believe that I'm reading this. This is shocking information. So put on that seatbelt. The Sfat Emet, the rabbi of Gur, he asked a question. This is Joshua that we're talking about. We're not talking about us, simpletons, simple people. We're talking about the leader of the Jewish people. We're talking about the right-hand man of Moses. Of course, there has to be something spiritual, some spiritual reason. Why did he take his time? Why did he delay the conquest of the land of Israel? There must be some reason. Spiritually. Listen to this. This is amazing. The reason why Joshua prolonged the conquest of the land of Israel, took him 7 years, was he realized that during the time of battle, there's a great amount of abundance, both spiritually and physically, that God bestows upon the Jewish people. Folks, amazing. Can you imagine that? When it's a time, Rav Kook has a famous line in one of his books that when there's a war, the powers of Messiah awaken. You know, people are always looking like trying to run away from the possibility of a war. Of course, there's also positive things. There are positive commandments in the Torah to go out to war and to fight and to eliminate evil. So, Joshua noticed that when the Jewish people are in battle, they merit to have bestowed upon them tremendous amounts of spirituality and physicality blessings. So Joshua says, let's keep it going. Keep it coming. On the other hand, the Sfat Emet says that Moses could not stand the wicked continuing to exist. And Moses wasted no time. It didn't matter to Moses the benefits. Moses understood that there were benefits to prolong a battle against the nations of the world. That would bring upon the Jewish people tremendous blessings. But Moses could not stand. These are the words of the Sfat Emet. He writes it on the portion of Matot, which is almost the last portion in Numbers. And Moses could not stand the fact that the wicked who blasphemize God exist, and therefore he just did the battle really quick. And Joshua, on the other hand, made this mistake because the ending words of the Sfat Emet, amazing, and such should be a whole person. The attitude of Moshe, the understanding of Moses to eliminate evil immediately, that is the correct That is the correct ideology that every Jew should have. Those are the final words, amazing, of the Sfat Emet. Okay, so we have also the difference between Joshua and Moses. We have that down also. Our next topic in our refuting of Rabbi Avichai Cohn, is there a place for cruelty in Judaism? Once again, for those that are not familiar with the Rabbi Avichai Cohn, go back please to the first YouTube. It's called No Immunity for Beards and Payas. And you can find it on the YouTube. Hopefully Tzvi will give it a link over here to all the classes, all this 4-part series. And then you can understand why I'm going into all of this cruelty, mercy, cruelty versus mercy. You'll understand. So is there a place against the wicked, cruelty against wicked, or the enemies of the Jewish people? Yes or no? So, let's take it from the top. We have an amazing Rabbeinu Yonah. Rabbeinu Yonah was born 800 years ago. And he has a commentary on the Talmud, on the books of the Talmud. And in the book of Tractate of Blessings, Brachot, on the, if I'm not mistaken, it's on the 62nd page of Brachot, if I'm not mistaken, or around that area. And on the verse, the Talmud brings down the biblical verse that we should worship God with all our hearts, with all our heart. In Hebrew, it comes out to as if there are two hearts. It could have said libecha, one heart, but it says levavcha, two hearts. So that's what the Talmud learns, that a Jew has to worship God also not only with the good inclination, but also with the evil inclination. So now, give us an example, Rabbi Yonah, please give us an example of worshiping God through our evil inclination. I always thought that our evil inclination was to be destroyed. Not at all. Our evil inclination has a purpose. We must learn to use it in various circumstances. Just give you one example. Right? Give you one example. If a person has an urge to do some kind of sin, he could use his evil inclination, which is laziness. That is one of our evil inclinations, that we're lazy. And we could say, listen, we would love to do this sin, but we don't have enough strength and oomph to go out and do it. That's beautiful. We are using our evil inclination to do God's will. So let's hear another example from Rabbeinu Yonah. It says the following. He says, the good inclination, we could call it the trait of mercy. And the evil inclination, we could call it cruelty. So is there a place where we could use cruelty? That's the question of Rabbeinu Yonah, and he says yes. If we do not have mercy upon the wicked, if we are cruel to the wicked, this goes to show that a person not only did not do a sin, he's done tremendous service to God. This is a tremendous service. Once again, it's not my words. These are the words of Rabbeinu Yonah. And this is God's worship that we must do. And he heard this from his rabbi. Rabbi Yonah's rabbi was named Rabbi Shlomo Minahar. And he heard this explanation, how to worship God with our evil inclination. You know how to do it? It's to be cruel to the wicked, to be cruel to the wicked of the enemies of the Jewish people and to the wicked. So we see there is a place. Number 2, an amazing Ateret Moshe. Ateret Moshe, he asked a question. Why are characteristic traits not brought down in the Torah? This could be found in the book Ateret Moshe, 2nd volume, page 63. And he asks the following question. A great question. It's asked by many commentators. How come we don't see in the Torah, black and white, that you should not be haughty? You should not get angry. We learn it from different nuances, from different hints. But why doesn't it just say it black and white? That's a great question, asked by many. And there are many answers to it. But this answer is really amazing by the Ateret Moshe. He says the following. Anything in the Torah that we are told not to do, that means it would be point blank forbidden. All over the table. It would be 100% forbidden. There would be no opportunity to use this trait for the worshiping of God. So therefore, there's no such thing as a positive or negative trait. It depends what the situation is. It depends what we are faced with, how much. We have to weigh each predicament that God sends us. We have to weigh how much, if so, if at all, do we use our various traits. So just to summarize, there are definitely traits which usually are negative. Most of the time they're negative, but there's no such thing as a trait that is 100% bad. Therefore, it is not written in the Torah anywhere, don't be angry. Why not? Because if your kid runs into the street and you just pat him on the head and go on along with life, and you don't scream at him for running into the street, or if your kid is doing something very, very dangerous, you don't scream your head off. So there is a place for anger. The Torah teaches us when that is. Once again, usually anger is a terrible thing and we should stay away from it. Cruelty is a terrible thing and usually we stay away from it. But there are definitely times in life, different scenarios that God rolls our way, that we are commanded to use. That is why God created such traits, because they do have their time and they do have their place. So that's an amazing reason. Once it's in the Torah, then we could not use it at all. It would be 100% transgression, and that's not the way it is. In fact, it's so beautiful in the Hebrew tongue, in the Holy Tongue, characteristic traits are called measurements. That's the real word. The real word is measurement, because you have to judge the situation that is before us, what is needed, what type of action is needed right now. Haughtiness is usually bad, but sometimes a person has to be proud that he's a Jew. He has to be proud that he learns Torah and does the commandments. So there is definitely a place for pride in Judaism, and so in every single characteristic trait, there is a place and time for all. Next, when we think about this commandment to be cruel to the wicked or to the enemies of the Jewish people, what is the root source of this cruelty? Where does it stem from? So there we have three opinions. Three sages giving their opinion. Where is it coming from? When God wants us to use cruelty, where are we bringing this cruelty from? From which aspect of our being are we bringing this into fruition? So according to the Rav Yisrael Salanter, the father of the Jewish ethical movement, he writes, amazing thing. He tells us that when you are cruel to the wicked, this is the source of this action is coming actually from our good inclination. I would have said it's coming from our bad inclination, but it's needed. No, Rabbi Yisrael Salant says what stems from being cruel to the enemies of the Jewish people so they will not attack us and they will not hurt us and they will not murder us. This cruelty stems from the good inclination in a person, of a person's soul. Rabbeinu Yonah disagrees. We just read it a few minutes ago. He says that this is the root source of acting against the wicked and the enemies of the Jewish people stems from the evil inclination. But we're just using it in a good sense. And last but not least, we have Rav Tzadok Hakon from Lublin. He tells us very interesting that whenever a person is able to use a trait which goes against his or her personality or character, that move brings upon a person tremendous blessings from God. When we are able to overcome our personal traits and do what God sees fit for this case. So that is, a person is able to go against their nature when the time comes to do that. That's an amazing thing. Imagine a person is, one of his traits is he's lazy, and he's able to overcome that. And he's able to pray in the morning and get up. So that such a person that is able to go against nature merits to have tremendous blessings. Abraham was a man of love. He was a man of mercy. But when he went against his nature and when he chased away, expelled his son Ishmael, or when he went against his merciful and loving nature and was willing to kill his first and only son Isaac, he merited to be the forefather of the Jewish people, our foundation. Abraham is our foundation because of the fact that he was willing to go against his nature. Continuing on the question, is there a place for cruelty in Judaism against the wicked or against the enemies of the Jewish people? The Ibn Ezra on Deuteronomy chapter 11 verse 22. The verse says, cling to God. So the Ibn Ezra tells us that there is a tremendous secret to this clinging of God. But that's all he says. A commentary on the Ibn Ezra, his name is Avi Ezer, he writes he tells us this privy information. What is the secret here? Listen to this. This is amazing. What's the secret here? Clinging to God's traits, do not confuse them. For example, being merciful when one should be vengeful and be angry. Avi Ezer explains the tremendous secret. This tremendous secret of the Ibn Ezra is that God gave us many, many characteristic traits, and not to confuse and use the wrong ones at the wrong time, at the wrong place. Use them correctly at everyone in their time and in their place. So the example that he gives, one of the examples he gives is for a person to be cruel, a person should use his trait of cruelty upon the wicked, upon the enemies of the Jewish people. And he ends with these words, that only a few of the Jewish people are able to adhere to this concept and not confuse one characteristic trait for another. They are a few, they are a handful. But that's what we must strive for. To strive for, to use all of our characteristic traits. There is no characteristic trait that God provided for us, that God invented, that we were born with, that does not have its time and its place. We just have to be ready when that time and that place comes, and in the proper amount. The measurement has to be correct also. You don't want to go overboard, you want to go too little. But one of them is to be cruel to the wicked people. And once again, and remember that there are so few that are able to use all of our characteristic traits. Most people, if they're Mr. Nice Guy or Mrs. Nice Guy, that's the way they are all over the board. It doesn't matter who you are. If you're a criminal, if you're a person that deserves to have some kind of punch in the face, it doesn't matter. They will always be merciful. They will always be loving. I hate to say it, but it's kind of like the Christians. If you hit them on one cheek, they'll give you the other cheek. That's not Judaism. That's being a good Christian. So remember, unfortunately, we see so many times with our leaders, we see a lack of this ability to use all of our characteristic traits in the right time, in the right place. So remember that. Next, on the Aviezer, there's a commentary. The commentary is called Igeret HaYediyah on page 645. Listen to what he says about these words of Aviezer, which Aviezer revealed the secret of the Ibn Ezra. To cling to God means to use all our characteristic traits in its proper place and time. That is clinging to God. And God also is a God that is a vengeful God. That's also a part. Not only a merciful God, but he's also a God of judgment and of punishment. So we also have to follow in those ways. So here's what he says. The words of Aviezer pierce one's heart. It pierces all of our hearts. Why? Because the test to see if one is really connected to God is to eliminate the wicked and avenge against them. Yet on the other hand, have mercy for the righteous. This is like a dagger in our hearts. The words of the Aviezer explaining the Ibn Ezra are daggers in our hearts. Because this is the test. This is the true test. If I give in, if I'm just who I am, and I just give in to my characteristic traits, then I'm not a God-fearing Jew. I'm actually worshiping myself. The difference between a God-fearing Jew and a person that worships him or herself is when it comes to having to go against our nature. When there's a commandment that means to go against our nature, and we do it, that is a sign that we are true blue Jews. When we are unable to go against our nature, we are just worshiping ourselves, not God. And that's why this is so piercing. Are we able to use all anger? Are we haughtiness? Are we able to use them? Or no, it's not my nature, and I'm never going to do that. Well, that's not Judaism. That's self-worship. The holy Or HaChaim HaKadosh in Deuteronomy chapter 13, verse 18, he talks about a city that the members of the city decided to go and worship idols. That city has to totally be destroyed, and you're not allowed to have benefit from whatever material, physical materials, are there either. So the question is, was there ever such a situation? There's two opinions. Some say there was never such a situation. Some say that there was a situation in the past. Whether there was or not is irrelevant. That's the idea, that if a place has decided to worship idols, a Jewish place of course, then that community has to be totally destroyed. And after God tells us to destroy that community, he adds a verse, and the verse says, what the verse I quoted, it says that God will have mercy on you. So the Or HaChaim says, what's the connection between fulfilling God's will of destroying the city that people are worshiping idols and mercy? And he says the following, because when a person might think that by observing this commandment, this will change a person's nature to a nature of cruelty. He gives an example, a very interesting example of the Muslims. The Or HaChaim tells us that when the Muslims see blood and death, that really gets them going, that gets them high, gets their adrenaline moving. They really love to see that. They get off on seeing such scenarios. So don't worry when a Jew has to use the minority of times where a Jew has to use cruelty against the wicked. Don't worry. Our stock of mercy will be replenished. Nature will not take over us because we fought a war. God will give us plenty of repair tissues called mercy. And we will not become like the Muslims who get off and get excited and their adrenaline starts rolling when they see bloodshed. Remember that. Next, this is amazing also. In the book of Yoreh Hakima on page 124, it tells us there that it brings down the fact that Joshua was commanded to perform various cruel techniques against the 5 Amorite kings. For example, stepping on their necks, hanging them, throwing their corpses into a cave. And the question is, why is that? Why was there a need for God to command Joshua to be cruel? Once again, you could look it up. We're talking about Joshua chapter 10, verses 24 and 25. And I'm going to summarize just the amazing words of this book, Yoreh Hakima. This is what he says. Why did God command Joshua to do such a thing? It seems like this act is an act of cruelty, but not regular cruelty, extreme cruelty. What kind of benefit does such an act have? The enemies, we're talking about 5 Amorite kings, they're already in the hands of the Jewish people. So just take them as captives. use them as in a trade for maybe Jewish soldiers that were captured. Why was there a need? They're already in our hands. They're already unable to do damage against the Jewish people. So God wanted to give them this lesson, the Jewish people this lesson, that they should realize that there is no cruelty by being cruel against these 5 Amorite kings. Because if they're just left in the hands of the Jewish people, there is no message that's going over to the nations of the world. You better be afraid to attack the Jewish people. So if we are merciful to these cruel people, then they will not be merciful to us. They will take advantage of the situation, and as we said, they will buy their time, and when they feel time is on their side and they have strength, they will attack us. So therefore, a Jew has to look at this as not something cruel. No, not something cruel. Look at it, listen to his words. Just like when you put on tefillin, or when you observe the commandment of sitting in a sukkah, that's how a Jew looks at it. This is a commandment. Just like I put on tefillin on my hand and my head, I also sit in a sukkah. I also am cruel to the enemies of the Jewish people, so to put fear into the hearts of the nations that they will get off the backs of the Jewish people and they will not attack us, thus saving innocent Jews. That is really amazing. If you're sitting down, you must have eaten too much and you can't move. Moving right along. In Rabbi Yehudah Hasid, he lived in the year 1140 in Germany. In his book Sefer Hasidim, if you look it up, it's paragraph 1013. He tells an amazing story how there was somebody in his community that whenever he would be reading the Psalms and it would come to the word the wicked, for example, in Psalm 145, it talks about the wicked should be destroyed. He would skip over the word wicked. He wouldn't say wicked. So what was the end of such a person? What happened to him was that all of his children turned out to be total wicked people. And they also, not only were they totally wicked, but they also, all of them converted out of Judaism. Why? Because these people thought they had more compassion than God. God is the source of compassion, not us. So, anytime we have trouble eliminating the wicked, you better be careful, because we see this person, he was, all of his offspring, all of his children left the Jewish religion, because he could not get himself to say, may the wicked be destroyed. In the portion of Keiravtuni in Deuteronomy, Rabbi Yoshua Shuaib, he lived in 1280. He was a student of the Rashba, 1280. He writes the following: cruelty in its proper place and time is good, and mercy is bad. An example for this would be King Saul. Don't be overly righteous. Those are the words of the Sefer Hasidim, and also the book by the commentary by Rav Yehudah Richter. Once again, we're talking about scholars that lived 700 years ago. We're talking about Rishonim. Okay. Verses from the Torah, straight from the Torah, that you can check it out, which will give you the spirit of what we're talking about here. If we look up in the book Mishlei, chapter 12, verse 10, it says, the mercy upon the wicked is cruelty. Amazing. If we look up Jeremiah the prophet, 48, chapter 48, verse 10, God curses out those that do not use their sword to eliminate the wicked. These people are cursed. A tremendous example of this would of course be King David. King David, it says in the tractate Moed Katan 16b, it says that King David was coined Adino Ha'etzli, and the Gemara says, what does that mean? The Talmud says, what does that mean? Amazing thing. That when it came to learning Torah, there was no one more humble than King David. He was like a worm. But when it came to the battlefield, he turned himself into a cedar tree. There was no one stronger. That is a complete Jew. When it comes, before God, when we learn Torah, when we do His commandments, we humble ourselves. We are as worms. When it comes to fighting against the enemies of the Jewish people, that worm turns out to be one of the cedar trees of Lebanon, and no mercy for the wicked. Mutual respect. I wanted to bring two sources. We have to understand one thing, dear friends, that there is a need for the Torah community to respect those fighters, those hundreds of thousands of fighters for the Jewish people in the land of Israel. And there's a need for the fighters of Israel in the army of Israel to respect and understand the benefit of Torah. There is a need for mutual respect. When we receive mutual respect, then our troubles will be over them, and the redemption will be here. The problem is, there are too many people in both camps that have no respect. There's people that are from the Torah world, they have no respect. They could come up to a soldier and spit on him in the middle of the street. They don't know who the guy is, and they'll just spit on him, or they'll attack him because he's wearing green. And we have, on the other hand, we have many, many soldiers who have no respect whatsoever to the study of Torah and understanding that what gives the Jewish people the victories in war is the Torah, is the commandments. It just happens to be that fighting is one of the commandments. So if you fight, you're performing one of the commandments. This is written in two places I wanted to bring down. First in Tractate Sanhedrin 49a. If it was not for the fact that Yoav was the chief of staff of the army of King David, we just call him KD. Don't get it mixed up with Kevin Durant of the Brooklyn Nets. No, KD is King David. If it was not for the fact that Yoav was fighting wars, David could not have participated in Torah learning. Then the Talmud tells us the opposite side of the coin. If not for the fact that David was learning Torah, Yoav would not have been successful on the battlefield. Like, boom, just hit it out. The ball continues to fly out. That is the mutual respect. And that is not what's happening on Torah anytime. Unfortunately, they do so many good things. And I hate to spoil their party because the last day or two, they've had, a $2 million campaign for them. For their beautiful and and great website. But this, unfortunately, brings you down to the gutter. I cannot tell you as much. When we do not have gratitude and appreciation, we are not Jews. We spoke about this in the first class. A Jew is called a Jew because he has gratitude. The name of Yehudah, the son of Leah, gratitude. That is the essence of a Jew. And if you don't have that, you could have all the classes you want, Torah, anytime. You could have 1,000,000 hours of Torah. If you don't get rid of that class, or you don't allow to hear a different voice, you've lost much of your, I don't want to say all, but you've lost much of your merit. Next, we have the Smag, which is the book of the commandments. The book of the commandments was written 760 years ago by Rabbi Moshe Mikotzi. 750 years ago. On the commandment, the end of the positive commandment, 47. Check it out. He writes the following, that if it was not for the simple Jews who scatter their money to the Gentile governments, I guess maybe it's bribe money, and to the scholars, to the Jewish scholars, and if it wasn't for the ignorant Jews that would be out in the fields making sure that the food chain was working properly, the Torah scholars could not learn Torah. That is an amazing statement. We have to have respect. Both sides have to have respect. So here, Rabbi Moshe Mikotzi is telling us in his book of commandments, remember these words, that if it was not for simple Jews, they're not learned, and if it was not for the ignorant Jews that are out there working and both providing food and money, sustenance to the Torah scholars, they could not learn Torah. So we have to have respect and gratitude. Both sides. What amazes me is if we look in the mirror and we're honest with ourselves, really look in the mirror. And we'll end with this. If we look in the mirror and we look at our lives, and we should ask a question here. Here's this rabbi, he gets off, if we were just, following the Torah, we wouldn't need this army. How come this rabbi doesn't say it when it comes to so many other facets in our life? How come it's okay to put the book down, to close the book of Torah when it comes to health, to going to doctor appointments, to go to the hospital, have checkups? Why? Why is it okay to close the books when it comes to hospitalization? Why is it okay to go to doctors? Why is it okay to close the books and go out for how long? It doesn't matter. Why are we allowed to go out to try to earn a living? It's all from God. Why are we allowed to get married? Think about how much more time we would have to learn if we didn't get married. If we were just like, priests and we didn't get married, think about that. How much time we don't have kids to put to sleep and to talk to and to play with them, and we don't have our wives. Why are we commanded to go and get married? Why are we allowed to, in order to work, we're allowed to learn an occupation? We're allowed to put down the books. So we're allowed to close and put down the books for almost every facet of life. But we can't go to the army. Why is this different? I would love to hear that. Why is that different? We could put down the books for every damn thing in life, and that's fine. But we're not allowed to put down a book when it comes to protecting the Jewish people. Why is that? It seems like we might say the opposite. When the mitzvah of Shabbat, you can't get higher than the mitzvah of Shabbat. You can't get more holy. When there is a danger to one's life, what takes precedent? The holy Shabbos or life? Of course, life takes precedent. When it comes to Yom Kippur, the holiest day of the year, Yom Kippur, when we fast, and if somebody's ill, it's a danger for someone to fast, or someone just gave birth, and there's a danger. What buckles? Does the mitzvah of Yom Kippur buckle, or does living buckle? Yom Kippur buckles. Or if we take all of the commandments in general terms, there are times where we must give our lives, that's for sure. But we're talking about most scenarios. When there comes a danger and we have 613 commandments, what buckles? The 613 commandments or the danger to our life? We know that the commandments take a back seat. When there's a danger to the Jewish people, what takes a back seat? The army protecting? Or perhaps at least some of the Torah learners, if they're necessary? Very clearly, the army takes precedent over many Torah learners. So folks, there you have it. There's a need for mutual respect. There's a lot of things wrong with the army. We've talked about them in many of our classes. I personally told you at the beginning, today, if I was paid, I would not go. But from here, there's a red line that was crossed. And there has to be a gratitude, a respect for those that give of their years and their days and their months in difficult situations, conditions, to protect the Jewish people, to protect the Torah institutions in the land of Israel. There has been a line that Torah any time is crossed. So let's make sure that we always have 20/20 vision, and we're able to balance our Torah out, and that we should be on 2 feet and not on 1 foot. Till next week, have a great week.